Hello and welcome to London Shoes. This is a series of journeys through some of the more unusual and perhaps lesser known historical aspects of this magnificent city of London. My name is Jeff Clements and I'm a Londoner born and bred. I've lived, worked and socialised in London throughout my entire life, and I have a deep passion for its history, its people and its culture. You can find out more about that on my website www.londonshoes.blog. So, why not put on your London shoes and take a walk with me and let's see what we can find. My London shoes have brought me on a journey down to the north side of the good old River Thames, and in particular Southwark Bridge. A bridge that links the City of London to the south of London. The first bridge was built on this site in 1819 when it was known as the Queen Street Bridge. It was called that because Queen Street was the road that led from Upper Thames Street in the city onto the bridge. In 1913, a replacement and new Southwark Bridge was erected at a cost of around £800,000. And at that time, the bridge was notable for having the longest cast iron span ever made, which was around 240 feet. It started life as a toll bridge, but people weren't happy about having to pay to cross it, and so it was very underused as Londoners continued to use London Bridge further down the river, which was free of charge. In 1864, the management of Southwark Bridge was taken over by Bridge House Estates Trust, who then took the decision to make it toll-free. Now, the current bridge was built in 1921, nearly 100 years ago, and it's still in place today. Now, I know it's hard to believe, but from what you can see behind me, but statistically, Southwark Bridge has the lowest volume of traffic there is in London. So that's Southwark Bridge. So now, let's get on our London shoes and walk across to Southwark, where the real action is. Back in the day, south of the river was pretty much a lawless place. And the reason for that was that it was outside the legal jurisdictions of the City of London, just over there. Southwark itself was full of inns and taverns, brothels, bear baiting rings, the Globe Theatre, in fact, lots of different places for people to come over the other side of the river to have a jolly up. Nowadays, apart from Southwark Bridge itself, there are many historic landmarks right next to the bridge on the Southwark side. Close to Shakespeare's Globe Theatre is the Ferryman Seat. Now, the Ferryman Seat may just seem like a little bit of flint stuck in a wall of a restaurant. However, what it lacks in charm, it certainly makes up for in historical content. Long before there were bridges across the Thames, the ferryman would pick people up from the north side of the river and bring them across to the south side of the river, and vice versa. Being a ferryman was a tough old job. Not only were you bringing customers one side of the river to the other, when you're returning them from Southwark to north of the Thames, invariably they were drunk. So they could be quite abusive. But the ferryman's job was very important to London's transport system at that time. Next to the bridge, on the Southwark side, there still exists the steps down into the Thames that the ferrymen would set sail from. The Ferryman's Seat is actually located in a street called Bear Gardens. The street is named after the last bear baiting pit in London, which was situated right at the very end of the street. Now, bear baiting was a gruesome, barbaric spectator activity where trained dogs were set upon a chained-up bear until the poor old bear was slaughtered. Just a stone's throw from the Ferryman's Seat is the famous Globe Theatre, one of the key attractions that brought people to Southwark, and it still does. It was originally built in 1559. The building behind me is not the original. The original was just a couple of streets away, but this one was built in 1994 and still to this day brings thousands of people per year. Now, it might not be commonly known, but most of the land in Southwark and the social housing was owned by the Bishop of Winchester. Now, way back in the 12th century, you had Winchester Palace built here, and the wall that you can see behind me is the remains of that palace. It's a landmark, and of particular interest is the round window, which you can see up there, dating right back to the 12th century. It was located on the south bank of the River Thames in Southwark, very near the medieval priory which later became the iconic Southwark Cathedral. As we mentioned earlier, the Bishop of Winchester owned most of Southwark and its social housing. Now, if you didn't pay your rents up to the Bishop of Winchester, you could very well find yourself in Clink Prison, the site of where we are now. Now, the word clink probably comes from the slamming of cell doors and the sliding of the bolts or the chains around the prisoners' feet. But today, there's a Clink Museum, which is a very popular tourist attraction, very much like the London Dungeon. Now, another fact you might not know is that if you were a lady of the night and you didn't pay your rent and you were put into the Clink prison and you passed away in the Clink prison, because you couldn't have a Christian burial, you were buried in a place called Crossbones Graveyard, which is where we're going next. Crossbones is a pre-medieval unconsecrated graveyard, which means it was never officially declared by any church or denomination as a holy burial site. It started life in the 1500s as a burial ground and is now tucked away down Red Cross Street, Southwark, literally just a stone's throw from Borough or London Bridge tube stations. Throughout medieval times and beyond, the Southwark Ladies of the Night were known locally as Winchester Geese, which is said to be as a result of them bearing their white breasts to attract and entice the punters, and also as a result of their association with their landlord, the Bishop of Winchester. Crossbones Graveyard is now a memorial garden owned by a charity. It is said that at the time the graveyard closed, in the 1800s, there were up to 15,000 women and children buried the other side of here. And what you will find here is all tributes that people have left in commemoration of those people that were forgotten. Southwark is also home to some very unusual historical landmarks. This one here, for example. Now, you may have wondered why bollards are shaped the way they are. Well, I can tell you why. It's to do with this baby here. In the Battle of Trafalgar, the British captured the French ships and stripped them of all the assets. But the cannons were no good. They couldn't fit the British ships. So what happened was the French cannons became used as bollards in the streets of London. And this is one of the only remaining ones there is. The idea of using captured cannons as street bollards soon became very popular, and it also had the desired effect of really winding the French up. So much so that replicas were made and these started to be added to more and more of London's streets. Most of the original cannon bollards have been replaced over the years, but a few still remain, with their distinctive cannon shape being an iconic feature. Between 1600 and 1814, it was not uncommon for the Thames to freeze over for 2 months at a time throughout winter. Now, this was because of the design of London Bridge, which is just over there. Now, the London Bridge at that time was made up of a sequence of arches, and when the Thames flowed through those arches, it slowed down, and then it started to freeze, and all that freezing and the ice continued all the way back to Southwark Bridge over here. With this being a regular occurrence, Londoners decided to make the most of this seasonal situation and set up frost fairs on the River Thames. These frost fairs were quite an exciting and unusual spectacle, full of hastily constructed shops, pubs, ice skating rinks, barbers, shoemakers, tents to keep the public warm. Even kings and queens would join in the festivities, with King Charles reportedly often enjoying a spit-roasted ox at one of the fairs. Now, historic records and scenic paintings show that their frost fairs were held between 1600 right up to 1814. And there were 7 major frost fairs held, loads of other little ones as well. The very first recorded frost fair was during the winter of 1607-08, and the ice on the Thames was so firm that it allowed people to walk between Southwark on the southern banks right across to the city on the northern banks. However, as you can imagine, there was also the occasional tragedy. During the frost fair of 1739, a whole section of ice gave way and swallowed up tents and people. In the 1800s, the climate in the UK had started to warm up a little bit, making the continued running of these events impossible. And as a result, the last ever Frost Fair in London took place in January 1814. Although it only lasted for 5 days, this was to be one of the largest fairs on records. Literally thousands of people turned up every day, and there was said to be every possible form of entertainment, including a parading elephant. So, there you have it. That's all about Southwark Bridge and seedy Southwark. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget, you can find out more about this and also my other blogs on my website www.londonshoes.blog. Cheers!